In our gospel tonight, the Lord is speaking to us about how to pray effectively, how to pray in a way that will be heard by the Lord and cooperate with His grace. And He gives us the example of these two people in the gospel that are so different. The Pharisee, it says, spoke this prayer to himself, not even addressing the Lord, but speaking, reflecting on himself. And he's doing many good things, but his problem is that he counts it as all of his activity, all he's accomplishing, and he's looking down on others. Sees the tax collector right in the same temple. I'm not like him. But the tax collector, who is probably known as a public sinner, is a tax collector, he comes in very humbly, bowing to the ground, doesn't raise his eyes up even. And he prays, "Oh God, be merciful to me, a sinner." He acknowledges his need for God's mercy. He acknowledges his brokenness. "Oh God, be merciful to me, a sinner." And Jesus says that prayer is heard by the Lord. That prayer is received by the Lord, where the Pharisees is not. And Jesus gives us this principle at the end of the gospel that those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. The key attitude, the key disposition to effective prayer is humility. Humility, which is simply the truth of who we are before God, and trust in God's mercy. It's beautiful, the response of the tax collector, the prayer of the tax collector, is at the root of a famous prayer we call the Jesus prayer. It came in the Eastern world. In its fullest sense, it prays, "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner." Prayed over and over in the heart as a way of having that cultivated disposition that I'm trying to grow, Lord, and trusting in your mercy and growing in humility. And we were blessed today to have a wonderful representative of that attitude in having the relics of Padre Pio here with us today. They're now reposed, but from the 10:30 Mass till just before tonight, they were available, and it was beautiful to see people coming to venerate those relics of this amazing saint. Padre Pio grew up from a simple peasant family in Italy, and when he was just a child, his mother noted that he would have somewhat mystical experiences, talking to his guardian angel, talking to the Blessed Mother. And he was drawn to serve the Lord in a religious order. He chose the Capuchin Franciscans, and he entered them at the age of 15. And just at the time of his ordination, in 1910, he had the stigmata appear in his body and the pain of those wounds, Jesus' wounds in his hands, feet, and side. And Padre Pio was shaken by this, embarrassed by it. He didn't want anyone to know about it. And he said to the Lord he's willing to embrace that pain, to share in it, but he didn't want those wounds to appear, so to bring attention to himself. And they did disappear for a time, but then in 1918, the stigmata came back in full force. And Padre Pio had offered to the Lord to take on whatever suffering the Lord might allow in reparation and in intercession for an end of World War I. He was horrified by all the pains people were going through with the World War. And so he asked the Lord to be able to share in his suffering as a counter to the horrors of war. Those wounds, those stigmata would remain with him for 50 years. Wounds in his hands, his feet, his side, his shoulder, and he would, unknown to others, also have the pain of the crown of thorns. But it was said that Padre Pio would lose 1 cup of blood each day from those wounds pouring out. But more so the suffering of sharing the passion of Jesus. And that wonderful offering of himself the Lord took to bring much fruit into the world. Padre Pio, sharing in the sufferings of Jesus, became a redemptive offering and intercessory prayer for others. Padre Pio was given amazing gifts by the Lord. He had the ability to read hearts, and a lot of his ministry was hearing confessions, so he was known to be able to reveal to others what they might have been not mentioning or withholding. He wanted them to make a good confession. He was very merciful with those who were humble in confession, but he was known to hear up to 19 hours a day in confessions, giving himself for the Lord to save souls and heal hearts. Padre Pio also apparently had the gift of bilocation, where he was seen by others in two different places at once, verified by their witness. Padre Pio was an intercessor, but also saw the needs of physical healing too. So he worked to establish a hospital in San Giovanni Rotondo that still exists, a house for relief of suffering. He did that with just donations, and it was an amazing miracle of charity itself that continues on. But Padre Pio was also accused falsely of things by people who were jealous of him, even within his own religious order. False accusations that resulted in 2 times where he was restricted from celebrating Mass publicly, restricted in who could go to confession. And that was a great suffering for him, but he prayed for the people that had accused him falsely, forgave them, and he was exonerated. He was restored to being able to celebrate Mass. But it took 2 of those occasions, and even the Pope interceding. But again, he showed mercy. He showed humility. Of all the amazing spiritual gifts that Padre Pio had, it was probably his humility and his obedience that really showed his sanctity, why he became a canonized saint. It's interesting, the one who canonized Padre Pio was Pope John Paul II. And John Paul had met Padre Pio when he was a young priest. Carol Wojtyla, then a young priest, came to Padre Pio, went to confession to him. And then a second time he wrote to Padre Pio when he was a bishop in Krakow, asking Padre to pray for a woman in Poland who had cancer. Within a couple weeks of that letter, Padre Pio responding in prayer, the woman was healed. Padre Pio said to a brother friar, hold on to those letters from a young priest. They'll be important in the future. He had a prophetic gift of knowing who Carol Wojtyla would become. And all those wonderful signs of God working through Padre Pio, because he was humble, he was obedient, he was able to give himself to the Lord so fully. And he gave us wonderful wisdom and encouragement, all of us, how we can grow in those dispositions, to trust the Lord, to rely on him, not relying on ourselves. I'd like to read an encouragement that he wrote to all of his spiritual children. He said, may Jesus continue to grant you his holy love. May he increase it in your heart, transforming it completely in him. I repeat 1,000 times, and I will always repeat what I have always said to you. Do not fear. Jesus is with you. He is working within you and is pleased with you. You are right to complain of finding yourself more often than not in darkness. You seek your God, you sigh for him, you call him and cannot always find him. Then it seems to you that God hides himself, that he has abandoned you. But I repeat, do not fear. Jesus is with you. You are with him. In darkness, times of tribulation and spiritual anxiety, Jesus is with you. And then a portion of a prayer that many know, Padre Pio would offer this prayer after confession. And this is part of it. Stay with me, Lord, for it is necessary to have you present, so that I do not forget you. You know how easily I abandon you. Stay with me, Lord, because I'm weak and I need your strength, that I may not fall so often. Stay with me, Lord, for you are my light. without you, I am in darkness. Stay with me tonight, Jesus. In life with all its dangers, I need you. Let me recognize you as your disciples did at the breaking of the bread, so that the Eucharistic communion be the light which disperses the darkness, the force which sustains me, the unique joy of my heart. The Eucharist was the center of Padre Pio's life, and he encourages all of us to draw upon the power of the Eucharist, to draw close to Jesus in every Mass. Tonight, as we worship the Lord, let's ask Padre Pio to intercede for us, that we can grow in humility, in trust, that we can know Jesus is with us, and we can pray with him. Stay with me, Lord.